So my name is Sebastian Witalec, as you already heard. And let me get straight into the talk because I got a lot to say and very little time. All right, so if you're on Twitter, you can follow me on SebaVita. That's pretty much the most important slide for today. And now you laugh. You guys are terrible. Okay, you warm up. Anyway, so my talk is about code sharing. And the whole thing starts with why should you build native applications and why should you go with web? So native is really good for people who keep coming back to use your services, right? So it's way much easier to have a native mobile application on your phone because you keep coming back to it. You don't have to, open a URL, etc. It's just there already buffered. All the resources are there. And if you look at it statistically, we are 20 times more likely to come back to a mobile application or spend time in a mobile app than on the web. But then web on the other side is much better for the reach. So it's actually much easier to just open a website for once and then check something out and then close the tab than install an application, right? So web is really good for people to be able to reach your services, okay? But the whole thing is that it's not about web versus mobile, really. It's about how do you use both of them together. So like Luke Wróblewski pointed out pretty well, it was just like if you use both of them well, you're going to be successful, okay? But that comes with its own problems, right? If you use different technologies, you have different IDEs, all of a sudden you have different types of skills, synchronizing all the projects. It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare, right? And that's where pretty much like Angular 2 came out, and in the times when it was actually called 2, today is just Angular, okay? And then from the beginning, the whole idea was that Angular had its like a platform agnostic part, and that's pretty much where you create your pipes, services, components, etc. And then there was a platform-specific side where the UI renderers were kicking in. So that's where you would have your web render, or there will be a mobile render, etc. And like this concept was really fitting to the whole code sharing story. Okay. So if you, for example, wanted to create like a login screen, you would start with a modal that would have email and password for a user. Okay. And then you would create yourself a service, and that service you would use that model, and you would have like a login and register function. Okay. And then you would create yourself a component where you'd want to display that. So you would use that service, you'd inject it into a constructor, and then you'd expose whatever functionality you had in the service as a, let's say, login and a sign up functions. Okay? And then so far, none of it is specific to web or mobile or desktop or anything, right? It's only when we start creating the template, when we define what goes into the UI, that we actually say, okay, this is going to be something for the web. So in this case, this is my HTML to create the user login. So we bind to the user email, we bind to user password, and then we have two buttons, one that is attached to login function, another to sign up, right? So where does mobile come in? So that's where the love story of NativeScript and Angular started, and that was pretty much in May 2015. And pretty much like we were working with the Angular team together on how can we bring NativeScript into Angular. And then pretty much every Tuesday since that May, Tobias Bosch and Hristo Deshev, they were working together, and they're trying to figure out how we can use both together. And then from day one, like it was all about mobile world domination. And this is a screenshot from the very first meeting we had. And actually kind of you have that diagram I was showing you before. So straight away, these guys were talking about the platform agnostic side of Angular and the platform specific. So what we did, we jumped straight in, and as markup, we use obviously HTML. Then we use parse5 as the adapter. The compiler protobuf stayed the same. And the real work was really where we had to implement the NativeScript renderer. So that's our engine that pretty much allows you to take the Angular HTML code and then, for example, translate it into native UI components either on iOS or Android. And as well, this will generate like a native visual tree. Which pretty much does the magic. Having done that, we were able to then take the same component with the same service, the same model, but just provide different template. Okay? In this case, we would have a text field that would bind into user email, user password, and then we'll have a couple of buttons that bind to login and sign up on the tab event. So the actual HTML components we use here are slightly different, but everything that sits underneath is the same. So that's where the code sharing is. So let me tell you quickly what's NativeScript. It's an open source framework that you can use with either JavaScript or Angular to build mobile applications with native UI. And it works both on iOS and Android. Some of the benefits that you get is, because it's native UI, you get access to all the native animations, page transitions, pretty much everything that's native, you have access to it and you can take advantage of it. Since you guys already know Angular or you know JavaScript, you can reuse all your skills that you have. So you can, if you know how CSS works, perfect, you can reuse those skills. And pretty much Angular is first-class citizen inside NativeScript. So it's not just like some tiny wrapper that we wrote around it. It's actually a part of the whole framework. And then as a result, you can use NativeScript to build Android, iOS applications, while Angular itself gives you the web. And then one of the last things, with NativeScript, and this is a huge thing, by the way, you have direct access to the native API. So if there is a functionality that exists on the iOS or Android SDK, you could actually call it directly with JavaScript. So instead of writing Java or Xcode, you basically could actually write all of that in JavaScript. So if there's a functionality that, let's say, we didn't provide you wrappers for, you could actually create it yourself without any problems. All right? So, and then we run all that JavaScript code within a prepackaged JavaScript virtual machines. So the thing is that as much as we allow you to go directly for the, to call iOS and Android SDKs with JavaScript, you don't want to write separate code for iOS and Android. And that's where the NativeScript modules come in. So this is like an abstraction layer that allows you to just say, I want to use a camera and use camera module, as opposed to kind of thinking, oh, how is that done on Android, right? So the way you use it is basically you write your code in JavaScript, then you use those modules to perform generic tasks that are available both on Android and iOS, and that will give you, as a result, Android and iOS code. So one of the abstraction layer things you can have is, for example, for the UI. So if you want to create a UI component, you say, I want to have a switch. And then as a result, we will render you either a native iOS or Android switch. And the same thing applies to all the buttons, list views, you name it. Okay? But you just write it once, and it renders on both platforms. And then similarly, there's a bunch of other modules like file system. You want to create a file, you just require a file system object, create a new file, and then we'll give you two sets of code. So if you build this on Android, we'll translate it into this line of code. If you build this on iOS, we'll give you this as a result. But you don't have to worry about it. And there's a whole bunch of them. And since this is an open source project, you can actually go and see all the modules that we created in TypeScript, which is quite easy to read. So one of the last examples I want to talk about, and that actually brings us back to the bigger story, is the HTTP module. So as much as you write JavaScript, you'd want to make an AJAX call when you create when you call a web service, but it's not going to work, because iOS and Android, they have native other ways of doing it natively. So we created this HTTP module that you can require, and then you can call various web services. And then this pretty much kind of translates to this abstraction layer where you use this module, and then when you build the application, we'll give you either native or iOS or Android code, which will do something on the iOS or Android application. But then when Angular comes in, what you could do is actually say, I want to use an Angular HTTP module. And when you're building a mobile application, that will translate into a NativeScript HTTP module, which follows the same path. But if you build the same application for web, we'll give you the HTTP module from the browser, which will create an AJAX call, which will do something in your web application, right? So this is like way much bigger abstraction. So that service that I was showing you before for the logging is going to work on both, even though we have actually 3 different implementations of how you would actually call the service, but you don't care because that's already handled for you, okay? So let's talk about code sharing. What sort of things we can code share? So pretty much like all your TypeScript code, all your Angular code, almost everything, the only thing that you cannot really share is what goes into the UI, because even the user experience that is expected is very different. But you could, even if you had like a server application within your project, you could as well share some of the components, some of the models in there. And the whole idea is that when you share the code, you can share like all the components, pipes, routes, services, But really the differences, like I mentioned, is the DOM markup between web and mobile, and then the CSS as well, it will be different. But then everything else is pretty much shareable. So how could you share it? There's two approaches. One of them, you could just create yourself two separate projects and create, let's say, like a shared folder with some services and models, and copy and paste between the projects, right? For a small project, it will work. For a bigger one, it's a nightmare. So you take this shared folder, you copy it into a web project or a mobile project, and then you build them separately. It's kind of manageable on a like 1-2 days projects. If you want to do something bigger, you actually need some sort of automated build process. Okay, so you could use Webpack or Gulp or both of them together. And there's a couple of examples. So instead of you starting from zero and trying to set it up yourself, there's a couple of other projects that were already created. So one of them from Nathan Walker, there's an Angular seed, advanced Angular seed, which basically you can clone it, and it already starts with quite a few bits that are available for you. So you can just then go and then start adding your own bits that you need to build your own application. And then the other one, and that's the one I'll be showing you later on, is the one from Team Maestro, which is an Angular native seed. And this one is for now just web and mobile, but it's much simpler than the advanced seed. So those are definitely a good way to get yourself started. One of the cool things about both of those projects is that how we separate the concern is through the naming convention. So in our build process, if you want to have something that is specific to mobile, you could just add like a .tns. So if you have, let's say, a list component, you have one list component.ts that is shared for both. Then we have list component.html for the web, and then we have list component.tns.html for the mobile. And then that works straight out of the box. So let me just show you some basics of NativeScript, how it works by itself. So I hope you guys can see the code. But even like just to do a basic hello world, all I need is a label with a text saying hello world. And that's already going to render an application with a hello world in there. I could also like just start doing other things like, let's say in my component, I have a message property. I can save that. So that message property says hello ng cruise. So that pretty much updates straight away. We could use conditional styling or some other things. So let's imagine we have a property, say all good, which is set to true to begin with, and maybe a function do something that will just take all good and set it to the opposite value. So what I could do, I have a bit of CSS here. So this, just for the sake of showing you, is a class called warning that just sets it to sets whatever object to orange red. Okay. So in my HTML now, I can do something like this: class.warning when all good is false. All right. And I'm also going to add a button. Oh, that's not a button. Let's say I'll call it do something, and that one will call our do something function. So nothing magical, but you already start doing the stuff. So this is a native mobile application with a native UI, 100% controlled by Angular. And I can like switch the class between with warning or without. We can also, like I mentioned before, have native animations. So if I have keyframes, I call it zoom, and I'm going to do a quick transformation. So I'm going to scale from 50% at the beginning, then to like 160%, and at the end back to the normal size. So, and then I'm going to run this animation over 2 seconds. So I can save this code. That should refresh quickly. And you can see like our label kind of zooming in and out. And the cool thing is that this animation runs on the GPU of the device. So it's not controlled by JavaScript. I'm sending directly a call to iOS and say, can you perform this animation? And it's run directly by the operating system. And you can as well like this whole bunch of animations. So I imported like a library of animations in CSS that were prepared for like a web Angular project. And in there was like one called rubber band. So it kind of like squeezes in and out. Or there's like a one called bouncing from the left. So it kind of slides in. And this is the cool thing. Like I literally use animation. I can show you. So there's like a whole animations like set that were prepared for an Angular project, for a web project. And they just work. So that's very powerful. One other thing that we can do as well, you can use, there's loads of NPM modules that have native UI components. So there's one that's called a color picker. So I can, for example, import a color picker. Just quickly. And what I do is just I can create an instance of a color picker. I can select, let's say, create a selected color and set it to gray. And I have a function called show color picker. So that function basically goes to the picker, tells it to pop up. And then once the user selected a color, I'm just going to go take that color and update my selected color. So what I can do with this now is as follows. So let me add another button. Say update color. The function was show color picker. And I'm also going to change the background color to selected color. I should reload quickly. So we have a new button. It's a bit ugly. It's gray. I can change the color to pink. And you can see like updating. I can as well go use different mode. And this is the very, very cool thing. This color picker is a native UI component, which actually I think was as well Nathan Walker that created an NPM module for it, just wrapped one. And there's an equivalent for it for Android. So exactly the same code. I get the access to all the native components. And the one last thing here is around navigation. So what we can do is if I use the NSRouter link to navigate to another page, I can provide a page transition. So I have, let's say, a page transition for curl, fade, slide bottom, or flip. So pretty much with one line of code, I get like very nice page transition coming up to my application. So those things are really, really cool. All right, so now we got some basics around NativeScript itself. Let me show you another project. So this one is around specifically code sharing using the second seed that I was showing to you before. I'm just going to build it quickly. I've got this thing called avatar service. And the avatar service has a couple of functions. One is get possible parts. So you will go to api.adorable.io and you will request all the available body parts. So there's different pieces for mouth, nose, and eyes, which kind of later on allows us to build an avatar. So that's one function. The other function is get avatar source. So if I provide the selected eyes, nose, and mouth, this will go and generate the URL for us to actually retrieve the avatar. Okay? But the thing is that in here we're using an HTTP module. So how do we solve in our application? How does this project know which HTTP module to use? So in our project we have app.module.ts. And then in here, you see we are importing an HTTP module from Angular/HTTP. And there is another app module, but that is for TNS. So that's for NativeScript. And this one actually imports the same one. Oh, yeah. Interesting. I haven't seen that. That's a new one. That's probably sorted out through the build process. Normally, what we would do is just like load a NativeScript HTTP module, but that changed. So the other thing is that within the application for navigation, you see, I've got only one configuration for my routes. So I have path to navigate to the avatar, There is like a pet search application. So the navigation is shared between web and mobile. So it's all in one place. So coming back to the avatar service, I can take this avatar service, and then I can use it within my component. So I've got this avatar component over here. And I've got like an array that is prepared to hold all the available eyes, noses, and mouths. I've got like a selected index, and I have like a property getter that based on the index will give me the name of the eyes, nose, or mouth. And what I do on ng inside ng on init, basically I get all the possible parts and I load them into those arrays. And then I have this reload avatar function that every time one of those property changes, I'm going to just refresh the picture. So as a result, I've got my HTML for the web application. So in here, like all I'm doing is just saying like a quick ng4 over all available eyes, and I'm going to create a button for each of those. And then when you click, for example, one of the buttons, I'm just going to change the selected eye index and then reload the avatar. And then I do the same thing for noses and mouth. And then at the bottom, I'm just basically displaying the picture itself. So if I open my Shareable project, that's the avatar. See, so we've loaded all the body parts, and I can, for example, say eyes 2, nose 7, mouth 3. And that was me last night working on the broken code. Come on, give me a happy face. So that's how it's done on a website, on the side of the web. Then if I want to do something similar on mobile, I'll have to use different components. So in this case, I'll get it started. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm creating a stack layout. So that's basically a container that allows me to stack components one below the other. Or if I want to do it, I can do it horizontally. Because there's no such thing as div in a mobile application. And then basically, I'm doing an ng4, and I'm creating a label for each of the available eyes. And I'm running this exactly the same process. On top, I'm just going to update the selected eyes index and call reload avatar. And then basically, I can do the same thing for noses and mouths. Okay? And then finally, I just need to display the image. So in here, I have an image component where I'm binding the source to avatar src, just like I was doing in the web, but this is a slightly different component. So if I save this and then I can build it in the right folder. So, and I'll explain as well like what happens in here in a second. What's really happening right now, I'm calling this build process that was within the seed project. That picks all the component files that are shareable, and as well the TNS files, but excluding the web ones, and then copies it over to a NativeScript project, and then runs the NativeScript build from there. So that's all done like automatically. So the project's almost built. So we got our home and about page, and that's our avatar. Reloading the body parts. And let's see. We can pretty much mimic, so eye 6, nose 5, mouth 5. So this is a really, really cool thing, because basically the only different thing between these two views was just that one HTML, but I was sharing exactly the same components, the same services. You can also share some of the styling. So for example, you could have a shareable SAS file where you could define all your branding colors, and then basically build two separate CSSs, one for web, one for mobile. But at least if I wanted to change from blue to green, I could do it just in one place. So if you guys are interested, if you like what you've seen, you can basically go to nativescript.org. That's where you can find a lot of information. You can join our Slack channel, which is like a NativeScript community. You can follow us on Twitter, and that's pretty much me. Thank you.